All right, now we have audio.
Can I get that link so that I can post on Facebook?
I sent it to the mailing list.
Okay.
It's in reply to the earlier email.
All right.
So actually, I need to turn off the speaker. I need to crank up the microphone a little bit. But we should have, yeah, we do have audio now.
All right.
Are we going to have pizza tonight? Do you know?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Okay.
And we're always spicy, but sometimes it comes very late. I mean, when you're about to give up hope, it shows up. So
All right.
we'll have good luck. Hope
Fingers crossed.
as we went dry. Fingers crossed. That's right.
So we've got a relatively small crowd in person here this month, probably because people are being careful about infection vectors and not wanting to carry around their illnesses, sicknesses, whatnot. But hopefully the live stream will work. My name's Devin Phillips. I'll be doing some of the presenting tonight. The other presenter will be Ben Fitzpatrick. And Fitzpatrick, right?
Yes.
Okay. Wasn't sure if I got that right.
You did.
And tonight we're talking about a couple of different topics. I believe Ben is going to be presenting his Linux distro of the month. And I'm going to be talking about working remote as well as being able to do sort of your own video studio for doing live streaming, webcasting sort of things. Somebody had asked on the mailing list, with the current state of coronavirus, a lot of people are being sent to work from home. What are some good practices for working from home? And so I thought I'd talk about some of the experiences I've had over the last 15 years working remote mostly, and some of the tools, techniques, technologies that I've used to make that possible. Shall we do introductions, go around real quick?
Well, there's so few of us. I don't know.
And you know what we could do, just to make this a little more fun, is we can have everybody circle around, stand in front of the green screen, and introduce themselves. Won't that be interesting? I think it'll be interesting. Let's totally do that.
I think we should. Yeah.
So let's start at this end. Everybody start coming around this way. I will move around this way.
Good. Go ahead. Thank you. Form a line, people.
You'll see your face on the screen down there.
I see. Good evening, I'm Chris Akridge. I am working at Billcom Ford on behalf of ePulsetrack.com. We're currently working on a website where you can buy cars online, new and used. Apart from that, I am a bit of an oddball here at the KYOSS group. I am mostly a Windows guy, but I've been interested in Linux and open source ever since or for a very long time. Just glad to be here. Looking forward to the talk tonight. Thank you.
So step back close to the green screen, otherwise your head's going to be chopped off.
Is it chopped
And
off?
come a little. Yep, there you go. Perfect. Nice.
All right. My name is John, and I'm an Oracle developer. Right now unemployed, and glad to be here.
Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Okay, let me make sure I'm in the screen.
And Ben's kind of tall, so be centered and as far back against the screen as you can.
All right.
So center yourself on the video camera on the tripod.
Yeah.
Looking
Good. I'm Ben Fitzpatrick. I
Look at
am.
the camera.
Sorry. I'm Ben Fitzpatrick. I am their resident. I am Ben Fitzpatrick. I am the KYOSS Linux distro tester and demoer. I am presenting Linux from scratch tonight with the LFS Pacman package manager. Hope you all enjoy it, and I do part-time tech support as well. Thank you.
Am I good?
Yes.
I'm John Hicks. I'm a kind of a jack of all trades, I guess, but when I'm working productively, I'm usually a LAMP developer, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. I enjoy doing business web apps, or web applications, I should say. I'm also the Meetup organizer for the Kentucky Open Source Society, and I manage their mailing list and so forth.
Hello guys, my name is Paulo Magino. I a Tier 1 Tech Support, Customer Support Agent. Currently more familiarized with Windows. However, I'm very interested and eager to learn about Linux. So here I am. Thank you so much.
Audio is really bad. It's very, very quiet.
Oh, spam.
I'm Adam Hanrahan. I'm pretty new to Linux, nurse by profession, just kind of here seeing what's up.
I'm Garrett Gillen. Work at Baptist Health in the supply chain, and I am a bit of a novice programmer, but I do quite a lot of data stuff with Excel and VBA.
Okay. I am trying to get us sufficient gain on the microphone to make this listenable on the live stream. So I'm going to bump this up to about there and see if maybe that is sufficient. Hey, I can hear me. All right. So again, my name's Devin Phillips. I am a senior software engineer with Red Hat. I work in the services and consulting organization within Red Hat. And as part of that work, I have been working remote for Red Hat for 3 years. Before that, I worked remote for a company called SunGuard Availability Services. Before that, I worked remote for a startup called DNS.com. Before that, I worked remote for a company called Metasys, ICIC First Source, whatever you want to call it. I have worked remote for several startups before that, not necessarily in a row. And so over the years, I've kind of developed some tips and tricks to help me stay focused, be able to still get work done, and have a good work-life balance, which is actually sometimes the hardest thing to do when you work from home. When you work from home, you're sitting in your office or in your living room or whatever, working at your laptop, and it's very difficult sometimes to say, oh, it's quitting time. And you might catch yourself 7, 8 o'clock at night still working away because there's nothing to really tell you it's time to go home because you're already home. Some of the tools and techniques that I've used in the past for working remote to help me stay productive are things like remote software coding pairing tools. There used to be a tool for Eclipse that I used a lot. It integrated with Google Hangouts over XMPP. Nowadays there is VS Code Live Share. Anybody here heard of VS Code Live Share? Okay. How many of you have used Visual Studio Code? The open source, multi-platform, integrated development environment. Okay, so about half of you. Visual Studio Code has a really broad ecosystem of plugins. So you can do JavaScript development, Erlang development, Java development, Kotlin development, Go development, you name it, whatever. VS Code probably has plugins for it. But about, I want to say it was about 2 years ago, Microsoft released a plugin for Visual Studio Code called Live Share. And in the early days, it was okay. Nowadays, it's actually pretty reliable. And what you can do with VS Code Live Share is you create an account on Microsoft's Live Share site, and you can log into that from Visual Studio Code, and you can start up what's called a sharing session. And you can send that link with that sharing session information to 1 or I think it's up to like 5 of your colleagues. And what happens is whoever is hosting the sharing session, their development environment is shown and synchronized with everybody else's instance of Visual Studio Code. So everybody gets to see the same editors, everybody can see the same terminal by default. Only the host can access that terminal, but the host can give access to a terminal. And so everybody can work on the same code at the same time remotely, which is really quite fantastic. As a senior member of the Red Hat consulting staff, I do a lot of mentoring for less senior consultants. And so being able to have them invited into my sharing session or having them invite me into their sharing session is really, really helpful. It's almost like being shoulder to shoulder with somebody and doing some pair programming. There is also a feature in there now where you can actually do voice chat right from Visual Studio Code and talk with somebody. I believe there might even be video chat. I've never really used it. So all of these features all together, none of this costs any money. You can use it for free. As long as you have a pretty decent internet connection, it's really simple. The only real consideration with using LiveShare in Visual Studio Code is that everybody who participates really needs to have access to the same source code repository, whether that's Git, Subversion, whatever. They all need to be able to attach to that same source code repository. That's really the only thing. Questions about Visual Studio Code LiveShare? All right. Yes?
Sorry. How does the debugging experience work? Like, I get editing, but how does debugging, how well does it work, I guess?
So it works the same when you're using LiveShare as it does when you're using just the regular Visual Studio Code, which is to say it's okay. It's probably the least well-developed feature in Visual Studio Code in my experience is debuggers. They work so pretty well, depending on the language, depending on the plugins. It's not great. Now, so Eclipse, like I said, has a plugin that you can get. I don't know if it's still maintained and usable or not anymore since Google has shut down Google Hangouts. But IntelliJ, or JetBrains, the company behind IntelliJ, behind ReSharper, behind a lot of different development environments, has promised in the first half of this year that they're going to release their own remote pairing solution. And unfortunately, that remote pairing solution will not work with Visual Studio Code, and Visual Studio Code will not work with IntelliJ's remote sharing solution yet. Although JetBrains has said that they might release a Visual Studio Code plugin. We'll see. And it makes sense. I mean, obviously, this is really difficult software to write for multiple people to edit the same document across the internet. So they have to make money on it, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Now, being able to share code with your coworkers and be able to share configuration files, text editors, things like that, that's really useful. But there are times when you just need to have a conversation or collaborate in a more direct manner. And so there's lots of different video conferencing solutions that I've used over the years. Some are better than others. Some are better supported on Linux than others. And from my perspective, working at Red Hat, we have two options that we use within the company. You can use Google Meet, because we are a subscriber for Google Apps for Domains for all of our email groupware stuff. Or we can use a service called BlueJeans. And BlueJeans is actually one of my favorites. A, it's cheap. It's $10 a month per user. B, and that one user is just the person hosting meetings. If you don't need to host meetings, you don't need to buy an account. If you just need to join meetings, you can join meetings. The other thing about BlueJeans that I really, really like is they have excellent first-class support for Linux, Windows, and Mac. You can install the browser plugin to run it, or you can run the local desktop application on any of those three platforms. You can do screen sharing. It has an integrated chat. You can turn on and off your video. You can use different video sources. It's actually a really nice solution. It's relatively inexpensive. And parts of it, not all of it, parts of it are actually open source, which is something I appreciate. Now, I have to, on a regular basis as a consultant, work with clients that don't use BlueJeans. So if they prefer to use whatever solution they use, sometimes I have to get a little creative. Let's say they use Microsoft Teams, and therefore they use Skype or Link. Skype support for Linux is gone. Using Skype on Linux is not supported, although I have gotten it to work in Wine once or twice. It's not great. That doesn't work so great. Now, The other commercial alternatives that I'm sure most of you have heard of, Cisco WebEx, yes? People have heard of WebEx? Works fine in the browser on Linux, just no problems. Screen sharing gets a little hokey. You can share a window, or you can share your entire desktop. You can't share an individual screen. So like I've got 3 displays hooked up to this laptop here right now. I could share all 3, or I can share a single window, but I can't share just one display. Whereas on Windows and Mac you can. Don't know why that is. Something about the way X Windows is supported. Now, most of those solutions do not have a way for you to give remote control over your system. That's where you might look at a solution like GoToMeeting and GoToMyPC. That entire ecosystem does offer you a possibility where you can give remote control temporarily to somebody of your desktop over a live session. Questions about that? So that's a little bit about collaboration. The other thing that is really important, especially for software engineers, for systems administrators, for operations people, is being able to share code or configuration files and things like that. And that's really where source control comes in. And we live in an era of plenty as far as that's concerned. We have GitHub, we have GitLab, we have Bitbucket, we have, you name it. We have lots and lots of source control systems that are really easy to download, install, or just use the SaaS offering, software as a service offering, that's free to use on the internet. But collaborating via GitHub or GitLab is absolutely fantastic. I love working on code in Git. It's probably, for a long time now, has been my favorite source control, source management tool. Depending on which solution you choose, whether it's Bitbucket or GitLab or GitHub, they have different levels of features. As far as I'm concerned, I think GitLab has the best functionality. It actually does really good issue tracking. You can set up Kanban and Scrum boards inside of GitLab. You can have nested organizations and groups and repositories, which is really helpful if you're trying to keep certain projects separate. I really like the functionality there.
GitLab is open source.
GitLab is open source. That said, it is one of the freemium model open source. So it's like 80% open source. Some of the more advanced enterprise features you do have to pay to get access to those. That's what I was talking about with GitLab and its issue tracker. Some of the more advanced features around Kanban boards and Scrum boards, like burn down charts and things like that, and things that an agile practitioner or a product manager would appreciate, Scrum Master, those features are enterprise features that you have to pay for. Questions about that? Okay, moving on. The next thing I want to kind of talk about when it comes to working remote is organizing your workspace. So, does anybody here actually work from home? At least a majority, at least 50%? Okay, so just John, really. For the younger people that may not have been around in the industry long enough to be earning a significant salary, find a place in your living area that is distinctly separate from the rest of your home, from your apartment or whatever. For those of us like John and I own our own homes, I actually use one of the bedrooms as a separate office. And I close the door when I go in the morning, and I come out when my son comes home from school in the afternoon. That's actually my way of knowing when I start the day and when I end the day. When I put him on the bus at 8:30 in the morning, that's when I start work. And when he comes home off the bus at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, that's when I stop work. So you need a separate space where you can be undistracted and productive. That is your work area, But you need to have clear ways of indicating the start and the end of your day. Otherwise, you'll end up working 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week because it's not clear when start and stop time is unless you define that for yourself. And that can be a problem. The other thing is if you're not working in an office, you don't have an office manager or a health and safety person making sure that you have an ergonomic workspace. So if you work from home on a regular basis, investing in a good chair, a good desk, good light, and monitor arms is actually vital. I have about 10 screens mounted around my desk, if you count a 4K monitor as 4 screens. And I have articulated arms on all of them so that I can arrange them so that I don't have to do, hunching over or bending funny ways, things like that. I also invested a little bit of money in a sit-stand desk. Now, you may think a little bit of money, those things are hella expensive. Well, the electric ones are, but they have pneumatic ones that are powered by a pneumatic cylinder and you just lift them with your own force. They're only about $250, $300. Yeah, things like that. Well, mine is actually a desk and it moves.
Oh, like the switches or?
No, it's got a little handle that releases a pneumatic cylinder, kind of like a chair goes up and down. My desk goes up and
Yeah,
down.
I have a spring powered one, so.
Yeah. So those are actually significantly less expensive than the electrically controlled ones. I don't like the electric ones. They're too slow. The pneumatic ones or the spring powered ones, they move as fast as you want them to move. And they're really easy to work with. So I actually spend about 50 to 60% of my day standing up just like this at my desk at about chest height. And all of my monitors are mounted off of my desk, so when I move my desk and sit down in my chair, all the monitors move with me. Yes?
How many monitors does yours support?
So it depends on how many armatures you want to buy, or what kind of armatures you want to buy. So what I've got is on one side of my desk, I've got an armature that holds a 4K 42-inch display. On the other side of my desk, I've got an armature that holds two 22-inch monitors. I've got 2 laptops and 2 external displays.
And the desk sports all of it.
Yep. Yeah, my desk is about 5.5 feet long, and it's about 3 feet deep, if I recall correctly. I want to say it's like 33.5, 34 inches deep, so just shy of 3 feet. So investing in an environment that is comfortable and won't tear up your neck, tear up your shoulders, tear up your wrists is actually really, really important when you work from home, because you don't have somebody that, does your OSHA reporting right there in your house. I'm actually pretty fortunate. Red Hat will reimburse me for a lot of that kind of stuff, but not every employer will. That said, if you go out and you invest in home office equipment and you work from home at least 30% of the time, I think, don't quote me on this, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a tax preparer, but you can write a large portion of that off on your taxes and get it on your refund. I write off, because both my wife and I work from home, we can write off, I think, 1,200 square feet of our house. So we can pay whatever we pay in mortgage, a percentage of that relevant to the amount of space we use for home office is deductible. Because we work from home and that's our home office. Anything we spend on home office expenses, whether that's books and papers and pens or desks and chairs, again, all can be put on my taxes as tax deductible. So very important things to know. As far as equipment goes, like computing equipment working remote, I've worked on a Chromebook and had no problems. $150 Chromebook. It's really, the equipment, it depends on what you're trying to do from home. If most of the stuff you do from home when you work is accessing cloud services or accessing Google Drive or web-based applications, you can get by with almost no hardware at home. And generally, if an employer has you working from home, they're going to issue you a laptop, or in my case, 4. So I have a Red Hat laptop that they gave me. I have an IBM laptop that IBM gave me. I have laptops that my clients give me to get access to their systems. I have stacks of laptops. It's really ridiculous. That's why I have so much desk space, so that I can move stuff around. And I actually have a little side table next to my desk where I can set more laptops. It's a little ridiculous sometimes. So that really covers a lot of what I do on a regular basis. I do want to make a special call out for if you're using something like Office 365 or Google Docs. The shared collaborative editor feature in those documents is phenomenal. You can do away with so many meetings by just hopping onto a Google Doc and everybody filling out an outline in real time together collaboratively. It's amazing. It's super powerful, and it doesn't waste as much time. And then additionally, you can collaborate asynchronously. Not everybody has to be in the document at the same time. You just create a doc and say, hey, everybody, put your ideas about blah, blah, blah into this Google Doc. And people will jump in as they have time when they feel like they can get away from focusing on their real work instead of interrupting for a meeting. I love being away from the office because when I'm in an office, I am in meetings almost all day because somebody wants to chew my ear about something. Whereas when I'm remote, I can usually beg off and say, no, let's just do a Google Doc and we'll collaborate asynchronously. And that gives me better focused time to do what I really need to do, my primary job responsibilities. My understanding is Office 365 works the same way. I haven't really used it ever, so I don't know. Yeah. Another tool that we use on a regular basis is wikis. Everybody know what a wiki is? So a wiki is basically a place where you can put documents and write them up in a very simple either markdown or markup language. GitHub used to have wikis. They don't seem to have them anymore on any new projects that you create. GitLab still does have wikis. You can download, there's all kinds of open source wikis. I really like, there's one called XWiki that I absolutely adore. It's really easy to deploy in a container. Uses either MySQL or Postgres as a backend. And it has the same, if not more, features as all of the expensive alternatives like Atlassian, Confluence, or whatnot. I absolutely love XWiki. You can actually also spin up a copy of OpenOffice or LibreOffice alongside of XWiki, and XWiki can then import any Microsoft or ODF format document and automatically convert it to a wiki page. So upload a PowerPoint document, or upload a Word doc, or upload an ODF file or an ODS file or whatever, and XWiki will automatically convert it because it talks via the server implementation of OpenOffice, LibreOffice. It's really sweet. It's one of those killer features that it's hard to get away from once you get used to it. You're just like, I'll just design this real quick in a document and upload it to XWiki, and it will convert it into a wiki page for me. It's super fun that way. So that covers a lot of what I use on a regular basis. I really don't have the need for any special equipment to work from home. But that does lead into my second topic of discussion, which is I do a lot of tutorial videos. I do a lot of presenting. I've started releasing streams of tutorial videos on YouTube recently at the suggestion of some of my management. And God's honest truth, I'm shocked at how popular they've gotten. In a week and a half, I've got over 2,500 views and over 150 new followers on YouTube, which is mind-blowing to me. My nephew's actually angry at me. He's been trying to do like gaming streaming, and it took him almost a year to hit 100 subscribers, and he's really upset that I got there in a week and a half. But it comes down to your audience. There's thousands and thousands of gaming streamers out there, so you have too much choice. There's not as many people streaming about technology stuff. When I started streaming, I really started bare bones basic. I would use an open source app on my laptop called GTK Record My Desktop. It's really simple to download and install. You can set it up to just record a section of your screen or the whole screen. You can set it up to record audio or not record audio. And I would just use it to record my desktop and me speaking into my webcam microphone. It did not record my face. It did not record video to go with the screencast, but it works. And it outputs in either Flash video format or OGG Vorbis. And then you can upload that into YouTube later. It's actually super easy to use, super simple to get started, doesn't cost any special hardware for you. And that's how I began, I don't know, 5 years ago making videos, 5 or 6 years ago. And then I started playing around with other ideas. I wanted to do more complex things. I wanted to actually have my face on the camera like you see today. Now, that does require a little bit of extra hardware. If you're watching the live stream out there right now, you'll see that I'm walking around, but you see an editor, an IDE in behind me, but you don't see the background of the 700 room here. That's because behind me I have a green screen curtain. So if I move the green screen curtain in front of myself, I disappear. The green screen curtain and the frame that it is sitting on costs a grand total of $70 on Amazon. I think the curtain was like $26, the frame was like 40 something. The video camera that I'm using to stream from here is actually a bare bones basic cheap $7 jobby-do from Amazon as well. A $7 jobby-do. It was dirt cheap. This camera is actually very, very dirt cheap. You'll probably notice if you're watching the stream, I'm a little jerky. That has nothing to do with this camera. I've actually recorded a lot of videos with this camera. The camera works great. The problem is the bandwidth in this room is not so great. Plus, I'm running from a single laptop tonight, which means that what you're seeing in my development environment, what you're seeing processed with the green screen and the overlays and everything, the audio and the conversion to stream it out to YouTube is all happening on a single machine. That actually taxes out the machine and makes it lag a little bit, and you get a little jerkiness in some of the fast-moving video segments. So how do you avoid that? Well, you need a second computer. And a special little device called a capture card or a capture device. Now these come in USB flavors and in PCI flavors that you can plug into your machine. This one is called a Mirabox. It's about $100. And basically it has a USB connection that you plug into your computer sees it like it's a webcam. And it has an HDMI in and an HDMI out. So it can do pass-through. So on the machine that you want to do a screencast from, you plug the HDMI in to that laptop. For example, the machine that I've got Visual Studio Code showing on right here, I would plug this into that machine. And I would plug the USB into a second machine where I would run a piece of software to capture that video. And then I could additionally run the HDMI out to a monitor if I wanted to also display it on a monitor. That's really all there is to it. It's not a terribly expensive device. It's really easy to set up on Linux. There are other options. What I will warn you is if you're going to do streaming or capture on Linux, do not, I repeat, do not buy the Blackmagic design devices, even though they say that they are Linux compatible. The driver does not work. The software does not work. I have yet to get it to work even on a Macintosh. The only operating system I've successfully gotten the Blackmagic design devices to work on is Windows. So I highly recommend this guy. This guy is about a third the price of the Blackmagic Studio stuff. And it works just as well.
What is it again?
It's a Mirabox, M-I-R-A-B-O-X. And you can get these on Amazon less than $100, I think. Or at least I got mine less than $100. Maybe they were on sale or something, but yeah. This little device works phenomenally well. This is the other webcam that I regularly use. This is also like a $7 or $8 cheap, crappy webcam from Amazon from Dynex. It's like a 720p. It's a piece of junk, but it works fine for live streaming. So I started using this setup about, I don't know, 2 years ago to record events like this and live stream them. And I realized very quickly that some of the software I was using really wasn't up to snuff. So I went searching for a better alternative. And what I found is actually one of my favorites. It's called Open Broadcast Studio, OBS. And Open Broadcast Studio is actually a favorite among live streamers all over the world. People use it to live stream video games. People use it to live stream all sorts of things. And Open Broadcast Studio is very much like a real production video studio. You can set up layers in your video. You can have overlays. It does green screens. It has filters that you can apply to different layers in different ways. It can record audio. It can stream to YouTube or Twitch or any other RTSP sync. It can record locally. It can record multiple streams locally. OBS is actually an amazing piece of software. I'm always perpetually surprised at what I can accomplish with that piece of software. It's one of the best open source products I've ever used. So OBS on a separate laptop with an HDMI capture is a fantastic solution. But then I started to get more followers, produce more videos, getting more people looking at those videos, and there was complaint about the audio quality. You're probably complaining about my audio quality tonight. So I went recently, just about a week ago, and invested in a new studio microphone. This studio microphone that I'm using here tonight is over off to my side. It cost me about $35, $36 after tax, something like that. And it actually came with an articulated arm and a breath screen. If you don't know what a breath screen is, it's a little mesh screen that sits in front of the microphone so that when you breathe out or talk quickly, the wind from your mouth doesn't blow past the microphone and make a sound. The other thing is it comes with a nice little mount that's basically the microphone sits in a bungee cord nest so that vibrations from your desk or whatnot do not travel through to the microphone. So for $36, $37, I think, it was a really good investment. And I've gotten really good results out of that microphone so far. Tonight, though, I'm standing approximately 4 feet away from that mic just to be here in front of this green screen, so we may not be getting the best results. I actually had to crank the gain up way high, so you might get a little clipping, a little bit of static on the audio tonight. I apologize ahead of time. So what you're actually watching on this live stream is coming from Open Broadcast Studio, as I mentioned earlier. And there are multiple layers in my current scene, as it's called, in Open Broadcast Studio. The top layer is that name tag that you see in the bottom left corner that says Devin Phillips, has my Twitter handle, has the little red hat logo. The next layer down is me. This is the video from my webcam. And it's actually scaled down to a little tiny range in the bottom left corner. And on that layer, I have applied a crop, because if I didn't apply a crop, this video camera is actually a widescreen camera. And so you would see outside of the realm of my green screen, and you would see a bunch of stuff on the walls and to the side of me. So I applied a crop to narrow it down to show just my torso. And then on top of that, I applied a chroma key. Chroma key is basically saying, find this color and replace it with transparency. That's what chroma key does. Been around in the video production industry for ages and ages and ages. Used to take really expensive hardware to do it. Nowadays, we can do it in software relatively cheaply, relatively easily. What's really kind of exciting, I think, and I'm looking forward to trying it out, is there is now relatively inexpensive hardware coming around to do that for people that do a lot of screencasting or live streaming. Intel has released what they're calling their RealSense line of video cameras. For those of you that play video games, if you've ever used Xbox with Kinect, Kinect controller is a video camera, a infrared camera, and a sonar to get depth information. Well, Intel has started releasing video cameras with basically the same functionality. So little webcams that have a regular optical webcam, an infrared webcam, and that sonar to get depth information. And they use interferometry or interference vectors to determine the distance of the subject from the camera. And using that information, their software can eliminate the background without a green screen. That technology is actually decent right now, but it's getting better rather quickly. You do have to buy that special webcam. They run around $100, and then you have to have a piece of software that supports their RealSense library. OBS does support RealSense. There is an OBS plugin for doing Intel RealSense, and it works on Windows, Linux, and Mac. So you could, if you didn't want to invest in a green screen, and trust me, a green screen actually has its downsides. You have to be relatively close in on the green screen for it to work very well. And you have to have sufficient lighting, which is where this little piece of equipment comes in. I'm not using it tonight because this room actually has pretty good lighting, but I actually have to have this in my office reflecting off the wall in front of me to sufficiently light my face in the green screen, otherwise the green screen doesn't work. And if you look at this thing's a beast. If you're sensitive to light, I recommend that you cover your eyes here in the room. This thing is bright. It's a 57,000 Kelvin light source, which is the temperature of the color. So it's basically daylight equivalent color, and it puts out, I don't remember exactly, it's like in the thousands of lumens. So it's a very, very bright LED light with a diffuser. It comes with a series of diffusers. I bought a pair of these on Amazon for like $35. And they come with a couple different color diffusers so that you get soft light. Now, here's the issue. I'm sorry, you had a question?
What would you search for on Amazon for a light like that?
Diffuse studio light, or diffuser studio light. When you're setting up lights like this, if you're going to set up a home studio, something you need to keep in mind is, if you're watching from on the screen, you might notice that all of a sudden my green screen started acting funny. If I am casting a shadow on the green screen from the light, that is a different color according to the video camera. And so the green screen acts up funny. You do not want this shining directly past you onto the green screen, which is why I said I have this facing away from me on my desk in my home office, reflecting off the wall, which is a light color wall, to diffuse light everywhere. The other thing I have is I actually have two of these. I have one that I put behind the green screen to backlight the green screen to make it a consistent green. So that's my setup these days. I would have set up with both of my laptops tonight. Unfortunately, I was not too bright and I forgot one of the power cords at home. And so running this video equipment obviously takes a little bit of computing horsepower. My battery would have gone dead long before I finished this talk. But let's open it up to questions about anything that I've presented tonight.
All I can say is it was very darn interesting.
Uh,
And it actually gave me a little bit of insight to live streaming and remote access and things like that, so I was very impressed.
oh, that reminds me. How many of you are kind of the de facto family tech support? Okay, almost everybody in this room. So, how often has somebody in your family called you up and said, "Hey, Devin, something's broken on my computer. What's wrong?" And I'm like, I don't know. I can't see it. And so you're like, they're like expecting you to solve this problem, but you can't see their machine, you can't interact with their machine. In my case, they're down in Tennessee with really crappy internet connection.
I'm always having to go downstairs for that.
And so one thing I will suggest, if you are doing family technical support, to save your sanity and not be a complete jerk to your family, go out and look up, there is this wonderful website, wonderful application called, oh my God, I've forgotten what it's called.
Never started a sentence like that.
So, you know,
Uh,
proud of this year, I think.
multimedia or internet, one or the other. TeamViewer, that's the name of it, TeamViewer.
I use that a lot.
So TeamViewer, if you're using it for personal, non-commercial purposes, is free. It can let you take remote control of a machine. You can have your cousin, your aunt, your uncle, whatever, your grandparents send you a code that you can remote into their machine. Or if they really trust you and they have like a permanent on internet connection, they can just give you admin and you can connect to their machine anytime. So TeamViewer is actually one of my favorite little tools for helping out my family remotely. Because God's honest truth, I don't want to hop in my car and drive all the way to Greenville, Tennessee to help my uncle. But I do want to help my uncle because I try to be a nice guy. I'm trying to keep the good karma going. And TeamViewer works on Mac, Windows, Linux, and most of it is actually open source. You can download most of the TeamViewer source code from GitHub. It's a really cool little thing. If you want to use it for commercial purposes, it is available. They have licensing for that. It's not terribly expensive. I used to use it a lot at one of the companies I worked for back a few years to do remote support for branches all over the country. It runs fairly well on a slow or limited bandwidth internet connection. I was always impressed. It would actually work pretty well on like a 64K DSL line or a 64K fiber channel ISDN connection for some of our branch offices. So not bad, not much faster than dial-up, and you can still remote control a machine. I really did like using that tool, and I still use it with my parents and some of my aunts and uncles to this very day. So TeamViewer, that's one to remember. Let's see, is there anything else? Chat tools, I hate them all, mostly because there's too many of them. Red Hat has this tendency, because we work with so many open source communities, we end up with a bajillion different chat solutions. So I am a member of at least 120 Slack communities. We have to use Zulip Chat, we have to use Google Chat, we have to use Mattermost, Rocket Chat, Gitter, and trying to stay focused through umpteen different chat clients and hundreds of different communities is really difficult. So I suggest you get a tool to run that in a separate application. There are web application aggregators. They run an Electron, basically, and you can push all your chats into that one, and you can mute the whole thing. So I highly recommend, there are a couple of different ones out there. Some of them are open source, some of them are paid software. Because they are Electron apps, they will eat up quite a bit of CPU, regardless of what operating system you're on. They will chug down some CPU. That said, some are better than others. What else has been exceptionally useful for me in working remote? No, that's all I can think of. Any other questions? Anybody else have any other things they'd like to discuss about remote work or live streaming, home studio?
What do you think, does everybody know about SSH?
Secure Shell?
Yeah.
So the question is, does everybody know about Secure Shell?
Very basic, but very light.
So Secure Shell is like the modern alternative to Telnet. You can get a command line connection to a remote system. That said, it's not exceptionally useful for working from home because most of us who work from home are behind an internet provider that blocks a lot of things. And so it's difficult for us to say, hey, Bob, SSH into my home machine. That may or may not work depending on who your internet provider is.
So if you're working from home, you can SSH into your work machine.
That is correct, absolutely. These days, though, it's more cloud provider driven, and so you just VPN and connect to whatever solution they're using. So if your company hosts their own data center, you probably open a VPN connection and connect using vSphere and manage it that way rather than SSH, because then you can manage thousands of hosts instead of one at a time.
Well, I'm just thinking, these days, people are not set up for working from home. I don't know. I guess if they're essentially if you're using SSH, you're an admin. If you're an admin, you know about SSH. So it's probably.
Yeah, it's kind of a circular argument. I mean, if you're used to logging into servers, you're probably using something like SSH already. Even on Windows machines nowadays, a lot of admins are defaulting to using Secure Shell.
I guess one scenario would be you've got files on your business with your computer at the office. Okay.
And you want to use something like Secure FTP or Secure Copy
Yeah.
to move those files to your home machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's definitely an option. Generally, these days I see more people using something like Google Drive or Dropbox, or if you're a privacy-concerned person, you might use OwnCloud, which is one that I like to use at home. Everybody here familiar with OwnCloud? So it's a PHP application that runs inside of Nginx. And they've actually got a Docker container for it that you can just spin up really quickly. And basically what it is it's like own, O-W-N, cloud, for running your own cloud. And you can spin it up on your home network, open a port through your firewall if you're on like cable internet or something, and you can expose it to the internet. So OwnCloud will let you. It's basically like your own version of Dropbox or your own version of Google Drive. It can also integrate with OpenOffice, LibreOffice, like I was talking about with XWiki. So you can actually edit documents right inside of OwnCloud these days in a similar fashion to like Google Docs or Google Apps or Office 365. Yeah.
Yes. In scenarios where SSH does not work due to network restrictions on the ISPs, would TeamViewer work better?
Yeah, so TeamViewer actually would work pretty well because TeamViewer has an intermediary out on the internet. So TeamViewer hosts I guess you would call it a clearinghouse service. So your TeamViewer client connects to that service. Your aunt or uncle or whoever's TeamViewer also connects to that service, and they connect the two of you together. Yeah. So that will work through any firewall pretty much. All that's really needs to be enabled is HTTP, so web browsing. Yeah. It's a good question, though. It's a really good question. There was, for a time, actually a service, or sorry, should I say, there was a device or a virtual appliance that you could get called KeyBox. I haven't seen it for a while now. I think they kind of discontinued development of it. But basically, it was a Docker container that you could spin up and expose to the internet. And you could use it as sort of like a clearinghouse for SSH connections. So you could SSH into KeyBox or use a web browser client to log into KeyBox and get a terminal that could then bounce over to a machine that was behind a firewall because everybody had an ongoing connection to the KeyBox. And a lot of people were using it for remote administration. I think the reason it kind of fell down is there were a couple of security issues with it, and there weren't enough developers to really address them quickly enough, and it kind of fell out of favor. Yeah. So it's certainly possible. Is anybody here familiar with the concept of SSH jump hosts? Jump hosts. Okay, so a lot of organizations these days, instead of standing up a VPN that you have to connect to first and then access the network, they'll stand up what they call a bastion host. And it's basically just a machine that sits out on the edge of the network that only allows SSH. And so you have to SSH to that machine, and from that machine, you can jump to other machines or other network segments. So Secure Shell actually has automation support for jump hosts. If you've ever looked in your home directory, there's a .ssh directory. In that .ssh directory, you can put a file called config. And in that config, you can actually set up arbitrarily complex jump hosts setups. So you can say, I want to get to host X. But to get to host X, I have to jump to host A, L, M, T, and then to host X. And you can code that all directly in your SSH config file. And you just say SSH host X, and your config file knows that it has to bounce all through that to get you connected to host X. So that's actually pretty useful. That is a good thing to call out, I think. So SSH jump hosts, pretty cool. Actually, those bastion hosts are very common in the cloud these days. So people who run a VPC, a virtual private cloud inside of Amazon or Azure or Google, they'll usually stick a bastion host on the outside edge, and it's the only machine that has any accessibility into the virtual private cloud.
What's the term?
Virtual private cloud? Bastion, B-A-S-T-I-O-N. Nope. No, bastion, it's an old word derived from French to, like, it's a stronghold. Yeah, that's, any other questions about working remote? Yes? No? Maybe so? All right. Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully it was informative. And if you want, I can post to the mailing list with my hardware list or the tools lists that I was talking about tonight. And links to Amazon and all that good kind of stuff to all the hardware that I've been playing around with and been using. You can certainly spend a whole lot more than I have. If you look at all the hardware I have here, discounting the laptops, I think I'm maybe $400 total. $400 total. Honestly, the most expensive bits here are the HDMI capture device and my tripod.
How much was the microphone?
$35, $36. Yeah. So the HDMI capture device was like right around 100. The tripod was 80 because I needed a decent tripod that wouldn't wobble and stuff all the time. My webcams are, I swear to God, none of my webcams cost me more than $10. The lights, I got a pair of them for like $25. The microphone actually came with the breath screen and the articulated arm and a little USB audio device.
Good for $32.
Yeah, so that's really great. None of the software cost me any money. The green screen with the green screen itself, the actual sheet was like $30. The frame that I bought to hold it up behind me was like another $35. So like I said, most expensive things I've got are my tripod and my HDMI capture. That's pretty telling about how far we've come for studio equipment these days. It used to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to do green screen. Tens of thousands. And that's why you only ever saw it in news studios for weathermen and meteorologists. And nowadays you can do it at home for less than, well, you could probably do it for less than $100, honestly.
Camera, green screen, computer, microphone.
Yeah.
Is that your capture card there?
No, the capture card is here.
Okay, what's your interface you've got between the camera and that? You've got a little box there.
Oh, it's a USB hub.
Oh, okay.
It's just a USB hub.
Right.
Yeah, because this laptop only has 2 USB-A ports and 2 USB-C ports. And so to have my YubiKey and all the other stuff, I have to plug in a USB hub. I've got a port replicator that just arrived after I got here tonight. I was hoping it would be here before, because then I would just have one connection to this laptop and it would all work, but no such luck. All right, so for those of you that are watching the live stream, I'm going to stop the stream for a few minutes. We're going to get Ben hooked up to my capture device so that he can present.
Yes.
And then we will restart the stream in a few minutes. So check back on my channel. We'll start stream version 2 in about 10 minutes, I hope.
Hopefully.